Welcome everyone to week 6 of this tradition study, and we're on tradition 6. And I'm just trying to get the screen share back up. So let's all start, whoever wishes to join in with the responsibility statement. I am responsible when anyone
anything reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA who is to be there, and for that I am responsible.
I am responsible.
And as I said, we're on tradition 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance or lend the AA name to any related facility or enterprise, lest problems of money, property and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. And so just a quick recap, which I've gotten into the habit of doing every week. We are halfway through at tradition 6. So that first tradition on unity, as I think I've said every week, if you can't remember any other tradition or don't understand any other tradition, as long as you've got tradition 1, unity, we are each of us but one small part of a great whole, and we need to stick together for my own sobriety, but more importantly, I think for the benefit of those yet to come, for those who haven't made it to the doors yet. In tradition 2, there is leadership in AA on a rotating basis as suggested, and the ultimate authority being the loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. 3, that very simple eligibility requirement being just a desire to stop drinking, that's all, which is a wonderful thing. It makes the doors wide open for any alcoholic. And then 5, the primary purpose. 4, autonomy. Each group is free to do whatever they want, provided that their decisions don't affect other groups, other nearby groups, or AA as a whole. And so through the group conscience and through communication with neighbouring groups can make the best decisions, to foster unity and to foster also tradition 5, carrying the message, the primary purpose. Shoemaker, stick to the last. We just do one thing supremely well and one thing only, and that's to stay sober, help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And then we'll just have a quick look at that bookends picture that we've looked at each week as well. So the last 4 weeks, we looked at those traditions which related to the group, the authority, membership, autonomy, primary purpose, and these 3 upcoming weeks, including today, that we never endorse, finance or lend the AA name to any related facility or organisation. We are self-supporting. So next week, tradition 7, we're self-supporting through our own contributions. And that's a good one for me as an individual as well, not to be looking for handouts or support from others financially, but to look after myself and be self-supporting. And AA is the same. That's one of the things that I really love about Alcoholics Anonymous, because we are self-supporting through our own contributions. We're not beholden ever to anyone else. Nobody else can have power or control over us because of, being indebted to anyone or anything like that. And then tradition 8 about being non-professional. Our 12-step work is never paid for. And so let's look at the long form of the tradition. That writing might be a little bit small. I'm not sure how to try and make it a bit bigger. And I encourage anyone to read those long forms of the traditions, because it really gives us so much more information and really tells us what the tradition really is. And so even if with this one, if we look at tradition 5 first, it says each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And tradition 6, the long form, which is pretty long too, gives us a lot of information. It says problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. Just that sentence in itself, if I think of myself as an individual, my, I suppose, ethics or morals or values or standards can get wobbly or can get challenged when there's money, property, prestige, authority, or power comes into play, because I'm a human being. I've got an ego, and those instincts that we looked at in step 4 as well, they come into play. They can get triggered off by these things. So just as these can be pitfalls for me as the individual, they can be pitfalls for AA groups and AA as a whole. So I'll continue reading tradition, the long form. We think, therefore, that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual. An AA group as such should never go into business. Now, some of these we think, oh, well, that's obvious. We would never do that. That's because AA has been around for 86 years already, and people have learnt all this the hard way. If you remember right back at step 1, we learned that these traditions were not, someone didn't come up out of their brilliant thinking and mind and theorize them and put them forward as ideas. They were hammered out on the anvils of experience. So they already did everything. They've done the hard yards. The pioneers learnt things the hard way already and have passed this down to us. So it's up to all of us here to safeguard these traditions, and which they originally referred to as the 12 points. What was it? The 12 points to assure our future. And so, yeah, groups should never go into business. Yeah, again, that to me just seems like, well, of course, we would never do that. But those early members found out through their experience, why not? Secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated and so set apart that, if necessary, they can be freely discarded by the groups. So, yeah, we're not tied to them and meshed with them, beholden to anything or anyone. We're not going to be getting messy. We can easily detach ourselves from anything like that. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them. For clubs, AA managers are usually preferred, but hospitals, as well as other places of recuperation, ought to be well outside AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one. So it's about really being independent, standing on our own feet, and this thing of we're not for or against anyone comes up again in tradition 10, when we have no opinion on outside issues and we don't get drawn into controversy, but neither do we get involved in a monetary sense with anyone. So let's have a look at tradition 6, out of Language of the Heart. My apologies again, I haven't noted the page number, but in my book it's somewhere around page 78, 79. Tradition 6. The 6th of our 12 points of AA tradition is deemed so important that it states at length the relation of the AA movement to money and property. And that was that long form that I just read out, and it was very long. It was very important. This tradition declares in substance that the accumulation of money, property, and the unwanted personal authority so often generated by material wealth comprise a cluster of serious hazards against which an AA group must ever be on guard. And certainly if you look around the world at people who have great wealth, property, power, prestige, influence, it doesn't always end well. You know, you can read these books. I read one of these Napoleon Hill books or whatever it was about these wealth creation or success creation, and it gave the tragic stories of so many millionaires who had actually died destitute, died of alcoholism, died by suicide. They just didn't end well. So sure, money, property, authority, prestige, they're not evil, they're not bad, but it seems that people really need to be on their game to manage these things well. And so for us in AA, the individual can collect as much wealth as they want, but Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole must stay poor. So Tradition 6 also enjoins the group never to go into business, nor ever to lend the AA name or money credit to any outside enterprise, no matter how good. Strongly expressed is the opinion that even clubs should not bear the AA name, that they ought to be separately incorporated and managed by those individual AAs who need or want clubs enough to financially support them. And I've mentioned the club that was around when I first got sober. It was called Bill W. House. And we've got a new clubhouse that's opening up here soon. And I think it's just called the Willagee Clubhouse. And I think they even open the doors to many different 12-step groups. So it's definitely not affiliated with AA. It's a separate thing altogether. And continuing on with the reading, we would thus divide the spiritual from the material, confine the AA movement to its sole aim, Tradition 5, and ensure, however wealthy as individuals we may become, that AA itself shall always remain poor. We dare not risk the distractions of corporate wealth. Years of experience have proven these principles beyond doubt. They have become certainties, absolute verities for us. And I know here in Perth, there's been a couple of high-profile cases of people in government, unfortunately, and I'm sure it happens in the corporate world, of people, when they are given positions of power, they abuse that. And these people have stolen millions of taxpayers' money. They're now in jail, but that greed, those defects, that defect of greed and dishonesty kicked in, and, more is never enough. So thank God we AAs have never yet been caught in the kind of religious or political disputes which embroil the world of today. Interesting, isn't it? That was written in 1948, and here in 2022, that sentence is just as pertinent. The kind of religious or political disputes which embroil the world. And I've said it before that AA has been a safe haven for me over the last 28 years, of course, but especially the last 2 years, where there's been some severe divisions among people in society over, certain topics. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we just stick to the one thing, our common problem and the common solution. But we ought to face the fact that we have often quarrelled violently about money, property, and the administration thereof. Money in quantity has always been a baleful influence in group life. Let a well-meaning donor present an AA group with a sizable sum and we break loose. Nor does trouble abate until that group, as such, somehow disposes of its bankroll. And that's why anyone who has been a member of a group, a home group in Alcoholics Anonymous, we are directed to just have a prudent reserve, which might be something like, the recommendation, I think, is 3 months rent in the kitty, making sure that our bills are paid and there's enough tea and coffee and biscuits and whatever, and we've got enough literature. Anything that's left over is distributed by a 60-30-10 plan or 50-30-10-10, what is it? There's different splits that people can send excess surpluses to their local district, area, or national office, or central service office, or intergroup, as it may be in your area. So it's all been taken care of. All the guidelines, suggestions, instructions, it's all there for us in our service manuals, the guidelines to the manuals, group handbooks, and so on. And the reading continues. This experience is practically universal. But, say our friends, isn't this a confession of weakness? Other organisations do a lot of good with money. Why not AA? Of course, we of AA would be the first to say that many a fine enterprise does a lot of good with a lot of money. To these efforts, money is usually primary. It is their lifeblood. But money is not the lifeblood of AA. And so, yeah, you think about pink ribbon or white ribbon or the Cancer Council, or, you know, someone's family member gets sick with an illness or a sickness, and suddenly they have charity runs and, you know, bake sales and whatever, raising all this money for research and hospitals, and fantastic. They do seem to do a great job of it. But for us, we don't need money. We just need a higher power and another alcoholic. And that's our business right there. Where there's two of us, God is there too. So with us, it is very secondary. Like I just said, there's no money needed for two alcoholics to talk with each other. And continuing on the reading, even in small quantities, it is scarcely more than a necessary nuisance, something we wish we could do without entirely. Why is this so? We explain this easily enough. We don't need money. The core of our AA procedure is one alcoholic talking to another, whether that be sitting on a curbstone, in a home, or at a meeting, or in a Zoom meeting, and which is free as long as you've got an internet connection. It's the message, not the place. It's the talk, not the alms. That does our work. Just places to meet and talk. That's about all AA needs. Beyond these, a few small offices, a few secretaries at their desks, a few dollars apiece a year, easily met by voluntary contributions. Trivial indeed, our expenses. Nowadays, the AA group answers its well-wishers, saying, our expenses are trifling. As good earners, we can easily pay them, as we neither need nor want money. Why risk its hazards? We'd rather stay poor. Thanks just the same. And let's have a look at the illustrated pamphlet. This is always a good one to look at, and adds some humour and also just another viewpoint, another way of understanding the tradition. And I love these pictures here. So, for example, there's a picture there of two little groups playing tug of war, obviously fighting over who's going to get the money or what to do with the money. And we found that there are all kinds of goals, motives, ambitions, and the good name of AA could be smeared. And as I said, these people that have gotten into trouble with embezzling money and doing all kinds of things, we don't want to even think about putting that kind of temptation in the way of an AA member or an AA group. That's why we have all these guidelines and traditions set down for us to make it easy. And there's a picture there of the AA letters, and someone's throwing mud at it and it's sticking. And so I love this picture here. There's two big icebergs, and one of them is affiliation of AA groups with anything outside AA. So buddying up, partnering with anyone out there. And the second iceberg, any activity that would harm AA as a whole. We've already got everything we need. We've got the steps, the traditions, our spiritual principles, one alcoholic talking with another. We are whole, and these steps, as I've read many times from the 12 and 12, when practiced as a way of life, expel the obsession to drink and allow us to become happily and usefully whole as an individual, but so too as a fellowship. If we abide by these traditions, we can stay happily and usefully whole collectively without having to worry about any kind of splits or schisms or fractures. And we can't afford that anyway, because our lives depend on it. And you can see the little steamer or the boat. And the reading says there are two major danger areas, which I just read out from that icebergs. But our course has been charted and the hazards clearly marked. If we steer clear of them, we should have smooth sailing. Isn't that wonderful? And I'm always forever grateful to the pioneers for the blood, sweat and tears that they put in so that we of today could just walk in and have it all handed to us on a platter like this. And there's a little reading there about tradition 6, but I think this also relates to tradition 8 in a little way. And the man is shown taking a hat off, and there's another hat underneath. It says AA members employed by outside agencies wear 2 hats, but Tradition 6 cautions any such members against wearing both at once. On the job, they may be alcoholism counsellors. They are not AA counsellors. At meetings, they're just AAs, not alcoholism experts. And that's a really good point for us all to be aware of and not get confused about. There's no professional class of alcoholics. We're all just alcoholics staying sober through this way of life. And the reading on the illustrated pamphlet reads, the related facility may be an outside group combating alcoholism or an enterprise that AAs want to start. It was the latter that most often confronted the young fellowship. Outside agencies were pretty scarce in those days, and some members thought AA should cover the whole alcoholism field. Led by a super promoter, as the 12 and 12 describes him, one group built an all-purpose centre, including a section for drying out treatment. Picture any groups tackling such a project. Arguments over cost, architecture, staff, fees, medication and rules might even make the local paper. And pity the poor newcomer straying into the group. We'll get around to you in a minute. We've got business to take care of. Though that ambitious centre failed, some individual members have since founded successful clubhouses, rest farms, halfway houses, etc. The enterprises are run by these AAs and patronised by other members or prospective members. But money and property are involved. Therefore, it has proved wise to keep the operation of the facility completely separate from that of any AA group and to keep AA or terms like 12th step out of the name. Toward outside agencies dealing with alcoholism, the AA policy is cooperation but not affiliation. A group cooperates, for example, by welcoming referrals from clinics or by sponsoring AA groups in institutions. But in one area, money for a rehab was solicited at an AA meeting, implying affiliation. In another, AA was listed among beneficiaries of a United Fund drive. And so let's go back to the PowerPoint. And I think where we might be up to now is Yvonne. Yvonne, as you all know, I think you've all been here. Yvonne's going to do a reading from the Daily Reflections for us. Come on in, Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne, alcoholic. That's page 1 from the Daily Reflections, page 119. Sacrifice, unity, survival. The unity, the effectiveness, and even the survival of AA will always depend upon our continued willingness to give up some of our personal ambitions and desires for the common safety and welfare. Just as sacrifice means survival for the individual alcoholic, so does sacrifice mean unity and survival for the group and for AA entire fellowship. And then the next reading. I have learned that I must sacrifice some of my personality traits for the good of AA. And as a result, I have been rewarded with many gifts. False pride can be inflated through prejudice, but by living Tradition 6, I received the gift of unity. Instead, cooperation without affiliations is often deceiving. If I remain unrelated to outside interests, I am free to keep AA autonomous, then the fellowship would be here, healthy and strong, and generations to come. And myself, like I just, I think you've covered this really, Tuija, you know. But I wrote down this. Hang on. Okay. When we realized there was a solution to all of alcohol problems, for some folk it may be tempted to use that information to make money, etc., like rewriting literature, starting classes or clinics to promote what we've learned, etc. Basically selling AA to all sorts of dubious places. It's like we could sell happiness. What we cannot be is everything to everybody, and we should not even try. For us, for a start, who would be the boss? We have no leaders or no money ever changes hands apart from donations for tea and biscuits. And you know what? Here in London, they have a program. It's called This Morning, and it's on every morning. And I was listening to this young lady, and she was sharing like about her sobriety, and she was mentioning AA, she was mentioning the big book, she was mentioning the spiritual experience, and the power of reading yourself, and the steps, and all of that stuff, which I was really quite surprised, you know. Yeah, I'm surprised about that. So that's me. That's all I've got to share. Thank you for listening. Oh, I just quickly, I've had another relapse again, you know. Sick of it, I am, you know. And but most importantly, that I've come back and I'm on day 3. Yeah. And I wasn't going to come on here, and I goes, no, Yvonne, you know, do you really want this? And yes, I do, you know. So I'm glad I came on to the meeting. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Yvonne, and thank you so much for participating and reading that for us. It was an absolute wonderful reading, really touched on some of our spiritual principles. I am going to have a look at P17, the pamphlet AA Tradition and How It Developed. I did put a link to that pamphlet into the WhatsApp group. I was going to read more out of this pamphlet, but it's quite long and I just haven't had time to sort of study it and pick out what I'd like to focus on in here. But so I'm just going to read a couple of random bits from this one. This is on page 16. So it talked about sort of farms and rehabs and retreats and things that are run by AA members, and how these can, bring in a lot of criticism and flack from other AA members and so on. So just reading on page 16, it said, the operation of such establishments is always beset with peculiar difficulties. It is difficult for the AA manager to charge high enough rates to make the venture include a fair living for himself. If he does, people are apt to say that he is professionalising or making money out of AA. Nonsense, though this may often be, it is a severe handicap. It is a severe handicap nevertheless, because the idea that I've got through from Language of the Heart and from reading the traditions is that, look, if someone's going to have a rehab, it might as well be a sober alcoholic if a sober alcoholic wants to take that job on. And why not? There's a lot of good reasons why a sober alcoholic could run or manage these kind of facilities. But the pamphlet goes on to say, yet in spite of the headaches encountered, a good number of these farms and sobering up spots are in active operation and can seemingly continue just as long as they are tactfully managed, do not carry the AA name, and do not publicly solicit funds as AA enterprises. So again, keeping that really clear boundary, this might be called the Sunrise Rehab, run by an AA member, but it's not an AA rehab. It's not a 12-step rehab. I'd hope that they'd be using other professional knowledge and information and training to run such a facility. And it goes on to say, when a place has an AA in charge, we sometimes do take thoughtless advantage of the fact. We dump alcoholics in it just to get them off our hands. We promise to pay bills and do not. Any AA who can successfully manage one of these drunk emporiums ought to be congratulated. It is a hard and often thankless job, though it may bring him deep spiritual satisfaction. Perhaps this is the reason so many AAs wish to try it. And just continuing, it's talking about clubs. Clubs in AA, are they with us to stay? This is on page 17 of that pamphlet, written in 1947, more background for Tradition 6. The club idea has become part of AA life. Scores of these hospitable havens can report years of useful service. New ones are being started monthly. Were a vote taken tomorrow on the desirability of clubs, a sizable majority of AAs would record a resounding yes. There would be thousands who would testify that they might have had a harder time staying sober in their first months of AA without clubs, and that in any case they would always wish for the easy contacts and warm friendships which clubs afford. Being the majority view, we might suppose that a blanket endorsement for clubs, we might think we couldn't get along without them. We might conceive them as a central AA institution, a sort of 13th step of our recovery program, without which the other 12 steps wouldn't work. At times, club enthusiasts will act as though they really believed we could handle our alcoholic problem by club life alone. They are apt to depend upon clubs rather than upon the AA program, just as some people might depend on AA meetings rather than the actual program of recovery. And it said, but we have AAs, rather a strong minority too, who want no part of clubs. Not only, they assert, does the social life of a club often divert the attention of members from the program, they claim that clubs are an actual drag on AA progress. They point to the danger of clubs degenerating into mere hangouts, even joints. They stress the bickerings that do rise over questions of money, management, and personal authority. They are afraid of incidents that might give us unfavourable publicity. In short, they view with alarm, thumbs down on clubs, they say, towards a middle ground. And I'll just read these two little paragraphs off page 18 of the pamphlet P17. Toward a middle ground. For several years now, we have been feeling our way. Despite alarms, it is quite settled that AAs who need and want clubs ought to have them. So the real concern is not whether we shall have clubs, it is how we shall enhance them as assets, how we may diminish their known liabilities, how we shall be sure in the long future that their liabilities do not exceed their assets. Of our 4 largest AA centres, 2 are club-minded and 2 are not. I happen to live in one which is. The very first AA club was started in New York. Though our experience here may not have been the best, it is the one I know. So by way of portraying the principles and problems we need to discuss, I shall use it as an average illustration of club evolution rather than as a model set up. So that's Bill W. writing there. He wrote this pamphlet, and so I'll leave the reading there, but I'm interested too, because I haven't had a lot of experience with clubs. As I said, we had Bill W. House here in Perth, which closed down when I was 3 months sober. And now we've had the Willagee Clubhouse, which has been under major renovations for the last 3 or 4 years or so, until after someone drove a car into it and crumbled one of the walls down. So, yeah, if anyone's got any, I'll open the floor for, oh, actually, I nearly forgot. There was one more thing, the traditions checklist. Let's just have a look at that before we go to the sharing and Q&A if anyone has any. So, the traditions checklist, which is a handy checklist for me as an individual, and I always thought it was for the group. So an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility, so no place or outside enterprise, no place or no business, or no organisation, lest problems of money, property and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. So the first question, why is it important that we not get involved in outside enterprises? Obviously, because we don't want to be diverted. We don't want this message watered down that we're working on. We don't want to be distracted or diverted from our primary purpose. 2, is it ever wise for a group to lease a small building or endorse an outside event? So no, a group wouldn't lease a small building, but they could incorporate so it's not related to the group, and then the group could rent a room off that incorporated organisation. So if the group needs to, the group can easily leave, because all the group does is just pay weekly rent. And an outside event, definitely not. AA wouldn't be endorsing anything outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. 3, are all the officers and members of our local clubhouse familiar with guidelines on clubs, which is available free from GSO? And there's also guidelines for AA members working in the alcoholism field. There's guidelines for AA members carrying the message into prisons. There's guidelines for everything. Everything's already been done. All the experience is there. It's really good. Again, I'm repeating myself, but I heard in a meeting recently, Einstein apparently said, the genius learns from the experience of other people. So it's no point me going blindly out into the world trying to figure it out myself. Me, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm better off just to go straight to our literature or to older sober members who have the relevant experience but are also in our literature and so on, because I'll just share this. When was it? 9 years ago, when I started working in the alcoholism field, I spoke to a woman. I knew she'd been working in this field, and I asked for her input, advice. She flat out said, AA members have got no business working in that field. Well, that wasn't the answer I wanted, because I really wanted this job. I wanted to work at this place. So I just ignored her advice and went ahead. It didn't occur to me to look in the service manual or the guidelines. I didn't know that there was guidelines for people like me. Now I know the guidelines are there, and so that's been really helpful. So just because someone's been an older sober member doesn't know that they're up with the literature, the guidelines, the service manual, and so on. And just because someone's been working in a particular position doesn't mean either that they are up to date with the AA guidelines and so on. Now, look, they're not laws or rules that can be forced on people, but they are, again, like the traditions, like the illustrated pamphlet says, a distillation of our experience. So they've gotten a whole bunch of experience together and put it down for us, so we don't have to learn everything the hard way. Just like with the steps, we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. We've got this path laid out for us. And the 4th question, should the secretary of our group serve on the mayor's advisory committee on alcoholism? That's a good question. I'd be interested to hear any answers if anyone's got any thoughts on that question number 4. Should the secretary of our group serve on the mayor's advisory committee on alcoholism? Now, to me, the answer that comes to mind for me is yes, the secretary can do that, but not as the secretary of the Rockingham People's Group, but just as a community member, or perhaps in their professional capacity, but not as an AA member, not representing AA, not bringing AA's name into it at all. AA doesn't want anything to do with an advisory committee on alcoholism. And the last question, our group's landlord is raising money to pay for a new roof on the building. Should the group make a contribution? What if the landlord specifically asks the group to make a contribution? And so, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, comments, shares on Tradition 6 or any of those questions. Hi, Balkia, come on in. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Balkia, I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Tuija, for the meeting again and for the readings. Really opens my eyes again to a lot of things, and yeah, I'm grateful for that, because there's so many things I don't know how it works, and this workshop helps me understand what and how, and gives me a bit of peace, so I don't need to get in a panic or what's going on and how does it work. So can I share a little bit where I'm at? Yeah.
Please do, go ahead.
I'm Boukje, I'm an alcoholic. I lost my sponsor a week ago, and it was pretty much a bit my own fault. I had this feeling from I wanted another sponsor, and I asked somebody, but they unfortunately couldn't do it. And I told this to my sponsor because I felt I had to be honest about it and not let it be in the way. So I told her, but and she said that's okay, and she said when it's time to part, it's time to part. But as long as you want, I'll be here. I'll be your sponsor. So that gave me relief. And then I always send RSDFs, so my 10 step, my resentments, and I did that. But I sent her resentment about her. I had a resentment against her, and that didn't work. So she applied that she thought it was quite insensitive of me to send that a resentment about her. And then she said maybe it is a good thing if you find another sponsor. So that dropped me way down. At that point, I was about to leave to go to England to scatter the ashes of my boyfriend that passed away 2 years ago on drug use. But I went to England anyway, and a day next to it, I got a new sponsor. And Sunday I took step 3, and magic is happening in my life. So just want to share that. I'm doing well. I'm on step 4 again. So I'm grateful for that. I have been on Zoom with AA a lot. I'll brief short because I can talk forever, sorry. But I have still trouble finding, having the trust to go to a physical meeting. So I hope somebody maybe can give me some tips on, I'm on step 4 anyway, so I need to get rid of my resentments. But it's clearing to see how AA works as being poor and being not relating to anything else but to the primary purpose, which helps me in my head as well to stay sober. It's like to say my primary purpose to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. So I love the simplicity of the program and also then the tradition. So thank you.
Thank you, Boukje. Thank you. And I wouldn't feel too bad about that. If you don't mind me commenting, I wouldn't feel too bad about that thing with the resentment. Very typical rookie mistake. I've had people send me their inventory listing me as a person they've got a resentment against. And it's like, no, don't send that to me. Send that to one of your step 10 buddies. And that's fine. So many people have done it, and you don't know what you don't know. When you're new, you don't know until someone tells you or until you find out when you do that, when you make that mistake or have that learning experience. I prefer to call them learning experiences rather than mistakes. Hi, Deanna.
Hi, ladies. Great to be here this morning and to be continuing on with learning more about the traditions. I'm sitting here with this deluge of information I'm gathering. As most of you know, my husband's in recovery also, and he did a big share at a physical meeting on Saturday. And it's a meeting, it's 12 and 12 meeting that we've been attending since the beginning of our sobriety up until the pandemic, of course. And it was great to be in the room with them. He did, of course, a fabulous share. He does his research, and I had provided him with a lot of the information that I've gotten here. But this one book that's really stood out, Our Great Responsibility, I don't know if you're familiar with that, has a quote that really stood out to me. And what I'm finding is all the traditions kind of resemble each other a bit. It says, what does it say? Oh, without AA unity, there can be no recovery. Oh, okay. Actually, these 12 traditions are in reality a codification of the lessons of our past experience that we got out of alcohol, of damned hard knocks in the early days, of AA, and which we continue to get. These are the lessons of experience, the list of hopeful do's and don'ts. Now and then I think about the origins of some of these traditions. You know, and there's just so much information. We don't get complicated with endorsements or alliances, and we keep ourselves as collectively poor as possible and not to get messed up with our dough, filthy liquor, whatever, LUCRE. There's just so much information. And I also picked up the pamphlet that you had downloaded at the bookstore, but just learning so much and having the information to pass along when it comes up, and having that knowledge and to continue growth is just a blessing. And it just is a great reminder today and how blessed we are to have a program and have the information. And oh yes, it says in here, we put the common welfare first. We are a pure democracy. So I'll leave it there. And thank you everyone for your share, and Yvonne for your readings. You know, what stood out to me in your share is, you know, I watch a TV show. I have seen Mom. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that. And it's all based around sobriety, AA, a group of women who get together for coffee. They discuss the meeting. They go to meetings. And I've always found that interesting. Yeah, that it's on national TV. And it really goes into depth, but I guess it's a fine line, but any education that I guess we can get out there for normal folks to live in a solution, know there is a solution if they're suffering is a great thing. So I'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for being part of my sobriety today.
Wonderful to hear you. That's great. Thank you, Deanna. And thanks for mentioning that book, Our Great Responsibility. When we first all jumped onto Zoom, as many of you know, I got rocketed again, and I got super, super excited and enthusiastic again about my recovery, wondered what the hell was I doing before March 2020. And of course, immediately bought a copy of that book. I think I started reading it a couple of chapters in, and then it's been sort of forgotten. So thanks for the reminder, Deanna. And I love that too. A pure democracy. I like what's not to love. Hi, Nikki. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. I'm Nikki, an alcoholic. And thank you very much, Tuija, for the meeting, and Yvonne for the readings. And everyone, you know, if you shared so far, Deanna, and I can't pronounce your name, but thank you. I don't know if you've gone. Oh, anyway, thank you for your share. She's not there. But yeah, I just wanted to say, because I was thinking we were going to, this isn't a criticism, this is just my mindset, okay? And how I'm making a bridge between jumping from adapting, because we adapt as a group, you know, like, so we're doing the 12 traditions, and I thought it was a 12 and 12. So I was thinking, I haven't done the 12 steps, you know, the first, as in the 12 and 12. And so it's skipping those, and I've yet to study those really, and then go into the traditions. But so it's like I'm adapting, because my interest really is more in the 12 and 12, thinking that's where I'm going to do the most learning. But because I've attended this in a not so regular way as I did the big book for different reasons. And but I'm finding that the knowledge, the wisdom that our founders, through, you know, as you say, their lessons and their spiritual insight and the way they've applied the principles in all their affairs, in all our affairs, it's just amazing. So, like, I'm just listening and trying to apply it to, like, wow, that kind of wisdom in your everyday life. I'm not in a position to say, like, I'd love to have, you think, oh yeah, run a retreat if I had them, if I had money, whatever. But the thing is, it's how you go about it, and then the guidelines are amazing, just to bear in mind, and they also help you see things realistically, and the dangers of, say, wanting huge sums of money, thinking it would buy you more freedom and you could help others, but there's responsibility which goes along with that. But there's guidelines, and I like the fact that it does allow people, individuals who may be AAs or in another fellowship. There's one particular person who's on YouTube a lot, but he doesn't present himself as, he's not representative of AA, or whatever else, the other fellowships he may attend himself. But he's quite useful. I find him really helpful. Like, I like the way he presents. I like his attitude and all sorts of things. And he's helping a lot of people in their recovery before they come in maybe to a 12-step. But I was wondering about the do's and don'ts, thinking, but this actually says, well, you can do things, but you do it in your own right. You don't go and say, I'm a representative of this fellowship. Like, for example, in this, where would a secretary go and be on a panel of experts under the mayor for alcoholism, not as a secretary, not in the role of a secretary, but in their own right. If they were asked, in their own right, they could possibly do that if it didn't intervene with their other AA principles. And I love all these guidelines. I just think that they kind of like steer us away from the icebergs of life. And even on a more mundane, everyday level, it's like, who do I want to, when I involve others in my life, affiliates, whatever you want to call them, like people who say, oh, I can help you do this, but then they have a say, then they feel that if they're lending you money, that they have a right to something, and then it can change, and then they might want to persuade me to do things a set way, which isn't what I want to do, going against my values, but then I feel almost beholden or obliged. And it can all get twisted. And I'm just thinking, even on that personal level, hearing these traditions and the wisdom behind it will help me to make wise decisions in my everyday life. So thank you. And thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for sharing with us. And definitely just made me reflect when you were talking then, how it might have been tempting for those early members. Remember, these are the pioneers of AA, alcoholics. You think the bottom of the barrel of society, the worst of worst, burnt their lives to the ground, thinking, do we need someone to help us? Maybe we need someone, and they did. They went to Rockefeller asking for money. Maybe we need some real grown-ups here to look after us. But they didn't. Somehow, through God, through the collective wisdom, somehow they figured out that no, we just need to do our own thing, stand alone. And I was just looking for, and I like that feedback as well, Nikki. Selfishly, I'll admit I was selfish. The 12 and 12, I have read the 12 traditions in the 12 and 12 a number of times. So for this workshop, I thought, let's go to the language of the heart. Let's do some other things. And that's why I set the readings out of the 12 and 12 for you as homework. So in theory, you've each read a tradition out of the 12 and 12 each week. And really the steps, this might be true, it might not. It's just what I've heard around in AA, that people didn't really want the traditions. People were like, I was just looking for it in this book, Language of the Heart. I can't find the reading, but apparently Bill was going somewhere to give a talk, and people were like, oh, Bill, tell us where you hid that alcohol. Tell us about that time you were drunk, and tell us about your raucous drinking stories. But for God's sake, don't talk about those traditions. And just before I go over to Karen, so they figured, apparently, I could be wrong, it's just what I've heard. So they figured that writing a book on the traditions wasn't going to sell too well. So they added the steps in at the beginning. So for me personally, when I look at the 12 and 12, I just want the traditions. The steps has good information as well. There is some absolute gold. Tradition one, step one, sorry, it's only about 2 pages long, 2.5 pages long, and it talks about, you know, the taproot and the powerlessness, and it does actually clearly define our problem in step one in the 12 and 12. There's a lot of good stuff about relationships in step 12, and so on. So, but there is, I believe, the big book for the steps, and the 12 and 12 is just some nice, interesting topics for discussion, but it's not the instructions for how to do the steps. And as I was looking for that reading about people complaining about Bill talking about the traditions, I came across this little snippet on tradition 6. It's from page 93. And yeah, I know that Kim and Kate did read all through the language of the heart, cover to cover in WIM, which would have been absolutely brilliant. The time frame didn't really suit me, but I believe they're going to be going on to AA Comes of Age. Highly recommend that if you can get onto WIM, if Kim is doing it, if and when that happens. So just before I go over to Karen, who's going to be our last sharer, I think, unless there's anyone else desperate to have a say before we close. Tradition 6 points at the corroding influence of money, property, and personal authority. It begs that we keep these influences at a minimum by separate incorporation and management of our special services. It also warns against the natural temptation to make alliances or give endorsements. Hi, Karen, come on in.
Hi, Tuija. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for the meeting today and all the information. Yeah, I feel as if my head is all over the place, but it's all great stuff. And thank you, Yvonne, for the reading from June the 30th, because I must admit, I, in my ignorance, had no idea the traditions were sort of in here. And I, like Nikki, I thought, oh, we'll only be using this book. And it's so, you know, such a big learning curve to realize it's in all our literature, you know, and now I'm using more and more literature and seeing how, for me, what stood out is how they're all linked. You know, the traditions, they dovetail, like last tradition 5 links into tradition 6, and then into tradition 7, then the money. But I was laughing at an experience I had when I first came into AA. I didn't have a sponsor at this time. I'd been sober a little while, looking for a sponsor, and my ego must have been growing back. And you know, this do-good in us, you know, have to do great good and good works, and probably a bit of prestige and ego was, you know, coming into play. But I wanted to, you know, my plans were, I said to my daughter, I'll have to do something. The public need educating, as it says in tradition 6, you know, and immediately I was thinking of hospitals in my head. You know, how could that be achieved? Knowing nothing about this literature at that point, but it just makes me chuckle that you know, I have to, as Dr. Bob's last words were to Bill, keep it simple. You know, my primary purpose was to stay sober, not fix the world, but just to do what I'm meant to do. And the Washingtonians I was reading about, how they were affiliated, is it over 100 years ago? I'm not sure of the times. I don't retain things like that very well. But they were quite successful. A very similar sort of, what you call them, I don't know, society as AA. But then they started becoming affiliated with things like the with outside agencies and I can't think of the people who used to go into schools when my dad was young, and they were all totally against alcohol. Can't think. Can anyone help me out with the name of the? Oh,
Temperance.
that's right, temperance movement, and all these other outside affiliations. And of course, there were arguments and politics and religion, which to me, step 6 is a lot of these are like warnings. They're big warnings. And self-sacrifice is one of them. You know, it's what's best for AA as a whole, and learn from the experience of our founders, because they've had all these troubles and problems. And I just thought, aren't we fortunate today that we got that? We don't have to experience all those teething troubles. They're there in our literature. And thank you to you and Yvonne and all those who've shared for bringing, highlighting all this, because it's great, isn't it? It's really good to keep learning, and I'm grateful. So thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming in, Karen. And I agree, they are all interlinked and dovetail, because if we're not providing affiliation or, linking with others, then it makes sense that we go on to Tradition 7 next week, which says we're fully self-supporting. We don't need any outside support, neither do we lend support to anyone. We just look after ourselves. Sounds a bit selfish, doesn't it? Hi, Jill. Good to see you.
Hi, Tuija. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone today. And I just thought I'd quickly get in there before we finish. And I've really enjoying reading about the traditions. I have read them before, but I don't think I really understood them, to be honest. And I think that the way that you're doing it through the pamphlet and through the different information is really helping. But like everybody else, I thought you were going to do it through the 12 and 12, so it was a wee surprise, which was a bonus. But you said there something as well, that Einstein said that we always, a genius learns from the mistakes of others. I'm obviously not a genius then, because I seem to not learn from the mistakes of others, and I tend to go in head first, with anything in AA. I tend to just go in. I've got all these grandiose ideas, and I think, I should be the one that goes right in there, and I can sort it, I can fix it. And I had no idea that I was like this. If you'd asked me before I came into AA, I would say, no, I'm the type that just likes to sit in the background. No, it's so untrue. And do you know what I'm realising now as well, is that I really don't feel safe in places that call themselves events, because the traditions aren't there. And I think I don't feel safe in there for myself, because I really need to go by these traditions, and I've been begging out from people to get guidance so that I can follow the traditions. I asked my first sponsor to can I guide me through the traditions and stuff as well, and she didn't want to do it, so that's fine. That's okay. So I have to go out my own way and try and get right in there. But I'm the type that I really get attracted to the events because they're more fun, and reading about the traditions. I mean, I'm loving it. I'm getting much more out of this than I would have going to an event that I thought was fun. But my head tells me, traditions are really, really boring, Jill. They're really, really boring. You don't really want to be there, Jill. You want to be at the event. You want to be at the event where they're all laughing, they're all joking, and you're the centre of attention. But what happens is, that wee group that you're hanging about with in the event, they move on to someone else that they can, they can be funny with, because you become not funny anymore because you're interested in doing something else, and they just drop you. They just drop you. But if you go to a group where it's the traditions and you're all learning and your recovery all the time, it's such a nice, safe place to be, Like this meeting has really saved my life the last wee while, because I thought I was going off my head, and I thought, it was like one thing after another, and I thought, my God, does everybody hate me? And I realised that, I was growing and I wanted to grow, and other people wanted to stay just in the little group that was funny, and that's not safe for me. And this is what's happened to me previously in the fellowship. I went a wee bit off target there. But it's a wee bit like, bringing other things into it, no, I went off target. I've lost the plot now. But what I'm trying to say is I feel safer. And one last wee story before I finish is that I knew a man that ran a retreat. And he was over 30, I think he was 33 years sober. And he had ran this, rehab it was a rehab that he ran out in Spain. And he dedicated all his sobriety, to the rehab and everything. And he didn't go to as many AA meetings, and he didn't take part in studies and things like that. And he relapsed after 32 years, because he didn't attend to his own recovery separate. He was just attending, looking after everybody else, but he forgot about his own recovery. And I guess that's, a part of what Tradition 6 was talking about there, outside enterprises. And I have been at different retreats and things like that where it's different, again, and it's not AA traditions, but it's calling itself, maybe an AA retreat, and it's not, and it's got the same as what I was talking about there, that uncomfort, that, it's not as safe. I can't believe I'm saying safe a lot. I obviously feel a bit unsafe just now, but I feel safe with meetings with traditions, and I think that's for myself. Okay, I'll stop there because I feel like I've really, really rambled on about what I don't even mean to talk about. So thanks, Tuija. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Jill. It helps me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing, and just goes to show you what I know, because I kind of thought, Tradition 6, there's not that much to say about Tradition 6. We won't be here long tonight. But yeah, there's always, when one alcoholic shares with another, God's there too, and we've always got lots to talk about. And so that does bring us to the end. Thank you again, Yvonne, for reading, and I'm really glad that you're with us. I'm really, really happy that you turned up, and everyone else too, everyone who shared and those who were here. Look forward to seeing you again next week for Tradition 7, and we'll close in the customary manner. If anyone would like to join in with the responsibility statement. I am responsible
when anyone anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA
always be there.
I am responsible.
I am responsible.
Amen.
Amen.